Siyabingelela siyamukela kuMathule Broadcasting Corporation. Asamukele abalaleli nababukeli be-MBC sithi salibonani namhlanje. Silethulela uhlelo olumnandi kakhulu namhlanje. Sinobaba uDr. William Mpofu. Sibuye sibe nobaba uPhilani lithandane Ndlovu. Abayibona abazohlaziyela ikakhulu ngestatement esethulwe nguPresident Mnangagwa ekhuluma kakhulu ngeMthwakazi. Ku-statement sakhe uthi yena iZimbabwe ingeke ize idivide into small states. Njalo labo abayibo aba-advocate for secession or independence of Mthwakazi or self-determination, uma bengabantu abalalelayo bazothola impilo ende. Abuye futhi asho nokuthi labo aba-advocate for independence kaMthwakazi impilo zabo kungenzakala ukuthi zinciphiswe. Ubuye futhi wathinta nokubopha. Siyacabanga ukuthi ngo-1983 wenza futhi esinye istatement lapho akhuluma ngokuthi babusisiwe abalandela imithetho kahulumende, kodwa labo bangayilandeli insuku zabo zingancitshiswa futhi. So ukuthi ukunciphiswa kwensuku zabantu into ayithanda kakhulu ukuyisho uma enikeza umlayezo esithi unzulu. So ke bakwethu ngiyalamukela kuMathule Broadcasting Corporation.
Siyabonga kakhulu baba Nkani.
Siyabonga Nkana baba.
Siyabonga. Njengoba nje senginikezile i-introduction ukuthi namhlanje sibheka kakhulu ngestatement esethulwe uPresident weZimbabwe Mnangagwa esihlasimulisa umzimba uma sibheka ama-historical realities. In the past, we know a sitting president in the form of President Robert Mugabe also once threatened Joshua Nkomo, and we know what happened in terms of the genocide. So I'm just wondering, ukuthi statement esethulwe nguPresident Mnangagwa, statement esimane siyethulwe ngumuntu nje noma statement esinomyalezo onzima, noma cha angize kuwe baba Mpofu ukuthi usibona kanjani lesi statement?
What I can say is that I'm glad that you are a knowledge worker and an information producer. You've been able right from the beginning to pick up the link that the present statement that Mnangagwa has uttered is a direct quotation from the Gugurahundi toolkit. This is not the first time he has said this. He said it in the thickness of the genocide, that victims must toe the line or else their lives are going to be shortened. And this announces to even those that have been denying that the Gugurahundi genocide is a genocide that is in progress, that is still taking place, that is still happening, and whose perpetrators are still determined to silence, erase, and politically. It's a statement not to be listened to, understood the African region. And for the in response to you just now, I want to raise a voice of congratulation to individuals, civil society organizations, political parties that have been keeping the voice of the victims loud. It's not an accident that at last President Mnangagwa has come to respond to the strategies, to the voices of those that he has responded, that he has ventilated the truth that he thinks and that he believes, that he has come out from himself is a result of the strategies of the activists on the ground that have refused that Kukura should be a silence issue, that it should be a closed chapter as Mnangagwa has wished. So let's count some victory there that at last the monster has come out of his hole to say, I can hear, I've heard. Even these threats are not coming out of strength. They are coming out of guilt, out of weakness, and out of the fear of the genocides that they have for the victims. Thank you very much.
Okay, Siyabonga, Dr. Mpofu. Baba Ndlovu, the same question to you. Should people take these threats or the statement like, what's your view of the statement?
Thank you very much, Baba Nkala, for the opportunity to address your audience. As Dr. Mpofu has already indicated, it is very, very important for us to understand this within the context of who the man is that ushered or issued the statement. Taking a look at his history, his involvement in the genocide as it began and as it continues, it is very important for us to remember that whatever he issues, particularly now as a sitting head of state and the president, he is issuing a word that is likely to be taken by his supporters who will then run with it. So whilst it is true that he speaks from a position, we must watch him very closely, because he is capable of carrying out that kind of what you call a genocide as he has done in the past, and now he should be watched very closely. I was thinking mostly in terms of the legality or absence of legality of issuing a statement of this kind. Number one, he is a sitting head of state. He is the president. He issues decrees, and he is so careless in his utterances. A question that I was pondering as I was thinking about this is who the statement is addressed to. Fair and fine, he sounded as if he was addressing the Mthwakazi Republic Party. Maybe a simple and a narrow interpretation of the statement could actually be taken along the lines that he was just talking about the Mthwakazi Republic Party. But regrettably, those who are rejoicing that maybe he's addressing a smaller grouping, that's how one would perceive the MRP. But when you look at it broadly, the concept of Mthwakazi does not only end with the particular party that he may be addressing. And because he addressed Mthwakazi, one remembers how in the 1980s they would address ZAPU, but they would end up annihilating communities, civilians in the process. So it would be very naive for anybody to assume that because he addressed the MRP or a particular political formation, therefore he narrowly means that. I want to imagine that he means much more than that. And I think it's high time the whole community became weary of that, because I don't think he is being narrow in his address.
Okay, taking into account that there was a genocide, physical genocide, we know that is a psychological genocide, and the other forms of genocide are still ongoing. The president, the sitting president, having made this kind of statement, do you feel that do you think they are safe? Their
Oh,
safety,
okay.
is it guaranteed?
Okay, maybe I can reiterate what I had already said, Babunkala.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, when he and Robert Mugabe purported to be pursuing ZAPU elements within Matabele, we know what happened. Fetuses inside their mother's wombs also happened to be members of ZAPU because they were pursued and they were, terminated even before birth. So when you hear him talk like this, to assume that he is referring to just one political party would be very dangerous and very naive for that purpose. Anybody who happens to be within the region that is perceived as Mthwakazi is actually in danger of this man. Because whatever he is going to do, if he decides to carry out his threat, it is going to cover and affect everybody. Remember, there's no way of discriminating just by meeting people in the street who belongs to a particular political formation and who doesn't belong to that particular political formation. So it is in the interest of everybody's safety that everybody who is a member of the community of Mthwakazi should be very careful and very wary of this statement, because it cannot have narrow implications, whatever he may have intended to say. I think it's going to be very broad in terms of how we will approach it. So everybody must be on the alert.
Okay, no, thanks very much. Asamgele usomlomo we MRP ubaba uvelile Moyo. Siyakwamukela baba.
Yeah, sanibonani.
Yebo baba.
Yeah, angazi noma ngiyazwakala mhlawumbe.
Uyezwakala kakhulu njalo sesiyakubona manje.
Ngibona manje hayi.
Siyabona. Hayi uthola nje sesiqalile uhlelo baba. Besisithi wena njengosomlomo we-MRP istatement esethulwe nguPresident Mnangagwa.
Yebo.
Lisibona kanjani?
Angisakuzwanga kahle khona ibingani iyabaleka lapha network.
Yeah, ngithi istatement esethulwe nguPresident Mnangagwa. Njenge-MRP lisibona kanjani?
Okay, istatement sika Emmerson Mnangagwa lesa sikhulume esechitungweza lela langa. Ngicabanga ukuthi thina njenge-MRP ngendlela esibone ngaso lesa statement okokuqala ngicabanga ukuthi lo udaba vele beludirectwe kithi, ikakhulu thina kuyithi esikhuluma kakhulu ngendaba yesization eZimbabwe. Kanti ke ma sicubungulisisa kahle inkulumo ka Emmerson Mnangagwa, kusuka kube lezi zinto eziningi ezididayo, njalo ke kube lezi zinto eziningi ezethusayo. Sikhangele ukuthi yena umakhuluma lesi statement engumuntu onjani, njalo enemvelaphi ethini emlandelayo yena njengopresident waseZimbabwe. Okokuqala thina into esethusayo ukuthi ungezwa sekukhulunywa ngumuntu okuthiwa i-head of state, njalo chief commander of the army. Into leyi isuka imangalisa ukuthi azama ukuchaza yikuphi, ngoba ama-threats akhe akhuluma kakhulu ebhekise ekuthini is either you comply or uyafa. That was the statement esiphume kuMnangagwa. So ngezindlela ngama-threats awukuthi abantu basangabulawa kumbe abantu basangenziwa okunye okuthile. Engicabanga ukuthi ama-statements lawana awakho democratically founded, ngoba yena okokuqala engupresident maye sitsho amagama afana nokuthi akababophi, ngezinye indlela kusho ukuthi yena ke naye uyayemposa ukuthi unamandla ukuthi angabopha abantu abafana entolongweni. Lokho kusikhumbuza Lokho kunokwenzakala esikhathini esiningi ngoba abantu bakithi abaningi bahlala bebotshwa ama-activists ephathi nama-members ephathi. Esikhathini esiningi bathi bangaboshwa uzezwa inkulumo laphana koBulawayo Central Police Station. Kuyabe kuthatha isikhathi uze kuthiwa sisalinde ukuthi sizwe ukuthi iHarare ithini. So okokuqala lokhu kuyasibonisa ukuthi kusho ukuthi ama-instructions ukuthi abantu bakithi baboshwe vele kusukela kudala abesuke velela khona eHarare. Akusiyo mhlawumbe yokuthi abantu bakithi kuma-members ethu kukhona ababekwenzile mhlawumbe ukuthi deserve ukuthi law and order ku-correct ngesingayo ikoBulawayo. Kodwa uzezwa bethi salinde ukuthi sizwe ukuthi iHarare ithini. So kuyaverifya okokuqala ukuthi hayi yena umongameli kusho ukuthi uyanika instruction yokuthi abantu abakithi kuma-members ethu kawaboshwe. And then maye khuluma ke futhi ngendaba yokuthi ke abantu kabalandele umthetho kumbe balandele lokhu oyikho okukhulunywa ngugovernment walesi sikhathi ukuze impilo yabo ibende. Kusuka kumangalisa ukuthi ke ungabe ekhuluma ngokuthi kumele silandele njengalokho abakwenza ukuthi ababa re-engineer social ukuthi baqalise ukuthi babone izinto ngesizano PF bangaboni izinto ngendlela abanayo ngesikhathi besalandela izapho. So ngezindlela kusibonisa ukuthi mhlawumbe uMnangagwa lapha uzama ukubuyisela futhi indaba ye-one party state kungabi le-opposition kumbe ngezinye indlela uMnangagwa usalwisana lemathebeleleni ngendlela nayo alwisana ngayo ngesikhathi sabo 80. Ingathi ngamafishane ke yindlela esikubona ngayo thina njenge-MRP istatement sikaMnangagwa sikhulume esechidungwini.
Yeah, kuyabongeka kakhulu baba Moyo. Baba Mpofu, let me come back to you. Uma singabheka maybe sibuyele emuva kancane. Maybe if ungasichazela kancane ukuthi irole ahaba nayo nge-genocide yiphi kahle irole ahaba nayo. Baba Mpofu, i-mic over to you baba.
Ngiyabongeka baba, ngicela ukuqala ngokuthi ngisho kuvelile Moyo ukuthi awakhuthaza amaqabane ukuthi khonokho kwenza uMnangagwa wagcina iphumele egcekeni njenge-backgroundist, wagcina ephinda amagama akhe awakhulumayo kudala ukuthi bona bayenza impilo yama-victims ibe mfitshane, bayabopha bayabulala. Akazithandelanga ukhutshwe emlindini kwesaba le-guilt, and konke lokho kungumsebenzi owenziwa ngamaqabane ebantwini phansi. In answering your question, I also want to set one record straight, that it is a fallacy and a falsehood. United Nations says nations cannot pursue self-determination, and that nations cannot pursue remedial or secession. He is trying to circulate a primitive lie that nations under the United Nations cannot pursue remedial secession, and that nations cannot pursue self-determination. When nations have suffered genocide, persecution, marginalization, torture, genocide, like the Mthwakazi nation has, they have the right under international law to rebel against an oppressive government, to pick up arms even and fight an oppressive government, to pursue their self-determination, and even to secede. So Emerson Mnangagwa is practicing a falsehood in saying otherwise. So that record must be set straight, and no amount of genocidal thinking and genocidal intention is going to take away that right from the nations of the world that they've been victims of genocidal regimes. Right. The role that Emerson Mnangagwa played, there are several researchers that have come to the fore and published works that document the role that the Minister of State Security had in the genocide. One of such researchers was an experiential researcher who is Kelvin Woods, in his book, The Kelvin Woods Story. He discloses that the Minister of Security was responsible for the operations of the genocide and also supplying information to government on what was happening on the ground and what should have been done, what was supposed to be done on the ground operations in committing the genocide. And Kevin Woods states that one of the most evil operatives, implementers of the genocide was Emerson Mnangagwa, more than Robert Mugabe. There's also Professor Milestone in his very good book on Solomon Mujuru and the army in Zimbabwe, who actually discloses after his good research that Mnangagwa went on to falsify intelligence information, to politicize intelligence in order to justify and to incense the government into fully unleashing the 5th Brigade in Velile and the weekends. So if anything, based on our research information, evidence, observations, arguments, and conclusions, the Kukura-Undi genocide lies squarely and straight in the hands of Emerson Mnangagwa. Can I utilize this minute that you have given me to clarify something, Gala? We need to establish Ndlovu no Moyo in this platform. Like, who is speaking when Mnangagwa speaks? What is the subject? And from what positionality and what locus of enunciation is he speaking? It's important to establish the same. One, we have a perpetrator of the Kukura-Undi genocide speaking. So his statements must be understood exactly from that location, that is a perpetrator speaking, it's a victimizer speaking. Second, we have a denialist speaking. This is a perpetrator that is denying that there was ever a genocide and that genocide has got effects and that genocide continues by other means. Third, squarely and fairly, we have a genocidist speaking. And we have a leader that is in power through force and through fraud. This is a person that has come to power through force and fraud. And therefore, fifth, that is an illegitimate leader who is in power through a coup, whose reputation includes a genocide, mass murder, crimes against humanity. And this individual is suffering guilt which is accompanied by fear. Well, the Bible says that the guilty are afraid, they even run when no one pursues them. But in this case, the victims of Kukura-Undi are pursuing the victimizers. They are not sleeping, they are not keeping quiet, they are not allowing the chapter of Kukura-Undi in Zimbabwe history to be erased. So he is very much afraid. And who else is speaking in Emerson Mnangagwa? This is a native colonialist. Himself, his family, his friends, that include Mthwakazi Takwire, have looted 15 billion on record of Zimbabwe's diamond. They continue to loot the gold, to smuggle minerals, and to monopolize the economy. Them, their families, and their friends have monopolized the economy at the expense of civil servants, at the expense of soldiers, police officers, teachers, nurses, doctors, peasants, and other workers in Zimbabwe that continue to be immiserated. So Kukura-Undi is a crime against humanity, like what Dr. Ndlovu was saying, must be understood at that scale and that level. That is not the problem of Mthwakazi and the people of Velile. It's a crime against humanity that is part of the genocide that took place. And all Zimbabweans, political parties, civil society organizations, civil servants, the population at large must take Ugurawundi as their problem, because Ugurawundi continues to happen against them. Disappearances, tortures, arrests, the of rallies, the violations that are taking place. All Zimbabweans, all human beings are candidates for Ugurawundi as long as we allow genocides to continue to insist on this. Native colonialists that have monopolized the economy and the quality of the country. And I think time is close that enough will be enough. Thank you.
Siyabonga Baba Mpofu. Baba Ndlovu. Njengoba nje uPresident Mnangagwa kubeke kwacaca ukuthi i-United Nations ayikuvumela ukuthi ama-countries divide noma kube ne-secession. Lina umbono wenu uthini kuloko, particularly in reference to Mathebeleland Mthwakazi?
Ngiyabonga kakhulu baba uNkala, ngibuye ngibonge no baba Moyo osethe wangena lapha. Ngibuye ngibonge futhi namagama ka Dr. Mpofu egcizelela konke lokho akushoyo ngokuthi ngibani okhulumayo. Sizoqaphela ukuthi ubekhuluma eseralini. He was in a rally. He was addressing a rally. He was politicking. And he was issuing statements, among others, which were meant just to persuade labo abamlalele to listen to him. Whilst still on that note, maybe just to get to your point briefly, and as briefly as I can, United Nations ayikushongo lokho futhi ayimelanga lokho, ikusenga ezimithiyo nje lokho. In terms of international law, there are requirements that communities and societies and territories need to meet in order to qualify for statehood. And the issue of the creation of states is an ongoing thing which has not terminated or ended at any point. The United Nations has never ever purported that it was a closed list of all the states that can be had in this world. It recognizes states that have met the criteria that is set in terms of international law, that territories must meet in order for them to qualify for statehood. So in that light, we understand Mr. Mnangagwa's statement as just a political statement meant to hoodwink the listeners who are naive and who may have lack understanding, so that he can just persuade them to believe what he wants them to believe. Because you see, even in terms of the laws of Zimbabwe itself, his statement is illegal and criminal. When one considers the fact that in terms of Section 48 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the right to life is enshrined and protected unconditionally. But the only condition that is there is that the right of life may be terminated in terms of a law of general application, especially to do with anyone who has committed a crime of murder with aggravating circumstances. So for him to just throw around that word so carelessly, it's very irresponsible of him, and it speaks of that fear that he has, that guilt that torments him every day of his life. And as we can see, it doesn't have any basis, it doesn't have a foundation. Maybe just as an example, to remind one another that in 2011, a state was born in Africa, that's Southern Sudan. But we know that the United Nations was formed much earlier in 1945. So how was it possible for us to have a Southern Sudan in 2011? How was it possible for us to have an Eritrea so in the recent years. So the issue is not only in Africa, but the world over. States do emerge in international law, in the international community. You will remember Babunkala Konalapen Konanina, udaba Scotland, how it was brought before a referendum. There are legal and legitimate ways of bringing about secession. Yingakho-ke yena makade ekhuluma ubemele akhulume ngokuthi mhlawumbe kungakhulunyiswana kanjani ngalolu daba. Hayi ukuthi abe sethusela abe sethina umthetho awuvumi abantu bazobulawa, because there is no law in Zimbabwe that allows him to carry out that threat except esekhuluma ngobugebengu nje kuphela. Because in any case, supposing and giving him the benefit of the argument, which we know he doesn't have anyway, giving him the benefit of the argument that maybe it is illegal to pursue secession, there would be legal ways of bringing the perpetrators of that crime, so-called, to book through the proper legal processes and so on. But we are talking here of a man who doesn't even mention the legal processes. He talks about terminating their lives, the lives of those that are carrying out those kind of statements and activities. We can see very clearly that he is a man who is determined to act outside the law. He actually perceives himself to be the law, because how can you make such a pronouncement which is not catered for in terms of the law? On what basis, whether in terms of the constitution or any statute in Zimbabwe? Where did he derive the power to make such a statement, other than just being a lawless person who does not regard the law whatsoever? Because even the president of the Republic of Zimbabwe is not endowed with the powers and the capacity to be threatening people like that without resorting to proper legal process. That is very, very important for us to highlight, Babuka.
Kakhulu siyabonga Baba Ndlovu. Baba Moyo. Ngokucabanga kwakho nangokubona kwakho, kungani uMnangagwa ekhulumela amagama manje?
Okokuqala nathi usimangalisile ukuthi uMnangagwa ukhulume lento towards ama-by-elections lawa. Thina kasikho la kuma-by-elections njenge-MRP asingenanga ukhetho lwama-by-elections. We are not a part of it. The campaign rally that was there specifically, they khangela ama-by-elections that are taking place today. But we really wondered why he had to make the issue of Mthwakazi, as if we are directly in opposition to him kuma-by-elections akhona. So Tina, when we're evaluating this, probably okukhona. One is Mpofu and Ndlovu, they're actually saying the kind of a person who is speaking. So Indolana also is telling to say, if Mnangagwa is the one who is speaking, is there anyone speaking behind him or speaking outside because of what he is feeling as an individual? So there are two options. It could be either there are people that are putting pressure on Mnangagwa for him to say this publicly against abantu Mthwakazi, about MRP speaking about the issue of secession. Or it could be Mnangagwa speaking of himself because he is actually suffering because of what he did. But maskangela so evaluate ngicabanga ukuthi uMnangagwa ekufikeni kwabo eMathebeleland ezizanu-PF, we saw them busing abantu and so on, but bayabe befikile ba-evaluate babona ukuthi abantu bemathebeleland, whatever approach they may be bringing, we saw ama-audios coming from eBinga after irally yabo, abantu bekhuluma ukuthi no, le into yenziwa izanu-PF sezama ukuthi bazobribe abantu and so on, ukuthi abantu babe silent. Abantu abaningi senzelele ama-tactics ezanu-PF, and uMnangagwa une-pressure yena ngakwakhe because he is seeing ukuthi he is losing grip of i-control yeZimbabwe. So usebuya lama-tactics ashiyeneyo okuzama ukuthi ethi intimidation. So okokuqala uyasi-intimidator into silence, and at the same time is trying to intimidate ama-communities akomthwakazi into silence. Ngoba esebhinga nakhona wayithinta le nto, esebhinga wathi bona abantu laba abafuna ukudivide ilizwe bangwe-legion, they need to be exorcised. Wathi sinama-demon, we understand. So kasakukhulumanga wathi ba, kodwa wasehambe siya kuthi ba eseseHarare. Ngezindlela ubengekho sure i-response azayithola ebantwini basebhinga kube emathebeleni come clean open about his opposition to stance sabantu basemathebeleni. Then he decided to go and say it eseHarare eChitungwiza. So in a way that means vele esiza kurally emathebeleni ubevele efuthelene ukuthi akhulume lento eyikhuluma wazibamba ngenxa ukuthi ubesazama ukuthi awine abantu basebhinga to his side. So ngicabanga ukuthi i-pressure esikhona and the way this thing is not sleeping ngoba abantu bakithi bayaboshwa and so on, but still abantu lokhu beqhubeka bekhuluma, and for all that njenge-MRP sesihambile kuma-communities besiba lama-kitchen meetings, lama-village meetings, lama-homestead meetings nabantu sikhulumisana nabo, and many people they fully understand what we are saying ukuthi into yeZimbabwe has failed us for the past 40 years. And the solution is ukuthi ibuye kithi. We cannot be hoping ukuthi iZANU-PF that has failed for the past 40 years to give us a solution is going to give us a solution. So outreach esesiyenzile towards abantu basemathebeleni and emakhaya, you know, asikazi into le ama-big rallies and so on to mobilize, but with the little resources sesihambile saba semakhaya kuma-cells, kuma-wards, kuma-councillors. You know, we meet quite a lot of people. Even some of the people from opposition parties, they would agree ukuthi issue Mathebeleni now needs a solution within Mathebeleni. We are supposed to bring that solution till. So Mnangagwa, now I feel ukuthi you got so much pressure internally and externally, and believe abanye abantu actually pushing him to start to wage that kind of a war. Sibonile that other guy, Joshua Mabonga, previous days ukhulume naye. When he came openly, waqalisa ukuthi akhulume bad things about abantu bemathebeleni. Also talking about that, ube khuluma refer back to South Africa. You understand? He's actually trying to say which asina labantu basemidleni esele kuphela ukuthi ama statements akamaponga umaponga, you can tell which he has been captured, and when he's coming in umaponga is coming in as if he's someone who is neutral, but you can tell ukuthi akakho neutral, but he has a point to raise, and then all of a sudden Mnangagwa is coming up in the open. So umaponga in a way he wanted to swerve everyone, and then abesezama ukuthi abone ukuthi i-issue yemathebeleni angayiletha njani into the open baqalisa ukuthi bakhulume ngayo. But you can see ukuthi ama-threats kaMnangagwa, they are pressures behind and they are pressures within.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Baba Moyo. Dr. Mpofu, some people have said that Zimbabwe will not commit another genocide in our lifetime. Do you think that statement is accurate?
Engakutsho ukuthi the genocide happened and continues to happen by other means. But and before I go into the but, the people that committed genocide are determined to commit it again. The person who was speaking, who was threatening, has the powers and the means to arrest again, to torture again, and to kill again. Not basing it on the determination of the genocides, but on the determination of the victims. And the kind of world we are living in today, it would be suicidal of Emmerson Mnangagwa to think that he can unleash a brigade again to go and annihilate the people of Mathebelele and the Mikians.
Right.
That
He is determined But njengoba ubaba Mpofu ebesho lapha kulokho esimve ekusho, the environment, that is the international community and the environment in which we now live, kuzoba lukhuni ukuthi abuye aqhubeke with such a brazen and open genocide similar to leya eyakuqala where he unleashed a brigade. So if anything is going to be done now, it would be underground, it would be clandestine. You would try by all means maybe to work in such a closed and a concealed way, if one could put it that way. But otherwise, of course, taking into account ukuthi they had those connections with the Margaret Thatchers of the time and the Jimmy Carters as well as the Ronald Reagans of the time. Bevala ulwazi bengalivumeli ukuthi umphakathi womhlaba ulwazi. That then was possible, but in this current era, that kind of a genocide in that manner and in that approach will certainly not be carried out. But at the same time, kufuneka abantu baqhubeke beqaphile ngoba phela as we have been ventilating here, Dr. Mpofu efakaza ebuye sikhumbuza, i-genocide is ongoing. Leya eyokubuya ngesibhamu ngeke asayenza mhlawumbe ibe obala, but le eyokuqhubeka ecindezela, sidelining the people and so on, isazoqhubeka ngayo. And at the same time, singakhohlwa ukuthi in 1983, 82-83, when that genocide was unleashed, people were caught unawares. People were not expecting that a genocide was going to be carried out. Remember, it was just 2 years after a ceasefire when there was that euphoria and excitement. So they just took advantage of the fatigue that the people had as a result of the war. As a result, they unleashed that genocide. But this time around, I think it's going to be very difficult technically, because I don't think that people would just be dragged I suspect if he tries to go ahead along the same lines this time around, things will happen a lot different. It's very unlikely that his victims are just going to take the whole metal line down and so on. I think those are some of the things that he must be thinking about.
Okay, siyabonga baba Ndlovu. Baba Mpofu, uxolo baba, ubungezwakali, connection yakho was very poor. So angazi noma ungaphendula futhi.
Can you hear me now?
The same question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, kakhulu.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I was on the point that the perpetrators of the genocide are determined to continue perpetrating and committing that crime. But as Dr. Ndlovu has just illustrated, they don't know what awaits them. The world has changed, the African region has changed, and the kind of victims that they anticipate, that they are envisaged, that they are looking at, are not the same victims. And people are not going to be sheep to track them. This time around, I think, as I said before, Mnangagwa will only fast track his own tragedy and that downfall if he tries that. But then, like what Dr. Ndlovu has just been telling us, these people are killers. They continue to kill, just like they've been killing each other. Look at Parents Shield, that genocidist who didn't know in his life that he was going to die alone in a car, with his aides not there, with the government he was working for not there, and poison eating into his stomach. They are evil, demonic, diabolic, and satanic killers. Look at how they roasted Solomon Muchuru, a hero amongst them.
Baba Moyo, let me come to you, sir. Looking at this statement, As MRP activists, leaders and members, how safe do you feel?
Babongala, I think the statement has a huge impact on the revolution, in the sense that we have activists, we have sympathizers, and we have people that are doing things behind the scenes. And we have community members also who are trying to come to terms with issues like Velile. The safety of us as a political party or a political party members, especially from the leadership side, cannot be guaranteed. Firstly, knowing that Emerson Mnangagwa, one is the head of state, and number two is the chief commander of the army, and knowing the kind of a country which is Zimbabwe, with their state security and also the very so-called parents and CIOs and everyone, you realize which this has given them an aid for them to act at any given time should they wish to upon any of our leadership or any of our members in any way to silence them. You know, when Emerson Mnangagwa as the president, he has spoken, that means he has literally given them a right to go ahead and do anything that they may want to do. Knowing the history of Zimbabwe, kunyamalala kwabantu, ukuthotshwa kwabantu, and ukuhlukunyezwa kwabantu to bring them to silence. Specifically, statement Lesana, it was meant to make sure that people go down to silence and stop speaking about the issues of Matabele. So it's a forced way to silence our people. So our security at this time cannot be guaranteed at all within the context of Zimbabwe, because you don't know what they are saying behind the scenes. They may not openly do some of these things, but they may do it hidden behind the veil of darkness to make sure they can even conceal it, but at the same time making sure they are silencing the opponents. So we know the stances and their modus operandi as ZANU-PF and also as the state security of Zimbabwe, how they do things. Our people are unarmed, and exactly how they did it during the time of Kukurahundi. And there is no way you can have the guarantee that the police in Zimbabwe can secure you, or they can guarantee you that security. They are always given instructions as to what they are supposed to do. So you cannot get that guarantee that the state security of Zimbabwe can actually protect us, because we are also entitled to the protection within the constitution of Zimbabwe where we are. But that guarantee, you cannot get it. Know how Zimbabwe operates in terms of eliminating everyone who is appearing to be in opposition of the government. West to mention the issues of Mthwakazi. The reason being, many people can be instructed to do things. Look at what happened during the time of Rawundi. Let me assume that some people that a brigade were actually put there to act on command, not necessarily that there were people that were determined to say, I'm going out to eliminate everyone that is in Ndebele or within the context of Tebele land. Some of them were given instructions to go and do it, or they were oriented to go and kill. So we may not literally say everyone in Mashonaland is against Tebele land, but we can safely say that when Mnangagwa speaks that in Chitungwiza, either way, he is trying to create a certain way to the people of Chitungwiza, the people of Mashonaland, to look at the people of Matebele and say, okay, so when Matebele and Bafun break away from Zimbabwe, then they deserve to be eliminated. You understand? So at the end of the day, we are looking at it from the context of Zimbabwe and say, then our is guaranteed. If during the time of Kukurahundi, they had to make sure which information does not circulate to anyone, so that they continue doing their things. Because if you look at it, actually, which media was black at that time, They made sure with Amazon, there was curfew and all those things to make sure with they eliminate people in silence. So either way, ZANU-PF in its operandi, they can come up with a way to make sure with they can eliminate everyone who is in opposition, especially who is speaking about the issues of Matabele, until they are done with them. Because if you listen carefully, as how Mnangagwa was uttering his statements, he said, before I arrest these people, let them listen carefully. So in a way, what he's simply saying is, I can take this into my hands and I can instruct anyone to act on these people. But I want them to listen and repent or take a different course altogether if they don't want to suffer these consequences. So literally, if we continue, that means our security is not guaranteed, because already the commander of the army has spoken. Already the state president has spoken. So that means it's up to us now to decide whether we continue or we toe the line. That means if we continue, then our security is exposed, because Emerson Mnangagwa has spoken and has told everyone that if they do not comply, then the danger of having their life exterminated or making sure that their life becomes short.
MRP, njengobusisho Baba Moyo, are you going to continue?
I think the revolution cannot be stopped either way. As much as during the time of independence, there were laws that regulated everyone, whether it was constitutional or laws that were being determined by whoever was in power during the Smith regime. But we saw that people continued because they wanted the independence that they wanted at the time. Even if Smith was saying there is no way a black person or the majority will be able to rule Zimbabwe, but within a short space of time, the people took out to the streets and they were able to go out in combat to the regime of the time. And they were in a position to have their independence. I'm not saying it's going to be the same, but what I'm simply saying is when a time of a revolution has finally come, there's nothing that can stop it. Because what is more critical here is Mnangagwa, what he's trying to do is a way to try to conceal or to try to force people into submission. But look at it, it's within a period of 40 years since the issues of the genocide happened. But that the genocide was there to make sure that they silenced the people, because they were forced to align themselves to ZANU-PF. They were forced to vote for ZANU-PF. They were forced to say certain slogans to make sure which they are socially reoriented or socially re-engineered so that they can start to look at things from a certain perspective. And we saw that there was some fear, even when you look at it, kudala, abadala ozothi bafanele ayazimpi, asifuni ukubonisa kunayo thina. Babetsho kanjalo, you understand? But if you look at it, that kind of suppression continued for a certain period of time. But there are certain things that happen generationally, to a point that the generation that is now is asking questions. Why were our parents and our forefathers killed? What was the reason? Because we do not have a reference of point to say they were killed because of this. And we have not seen any apology being given by the people that actually perpetrated these killings. And then we are seeing the same people. I myself looking at Mnangagwa here in power, I'm asking myself, Mnangagwa is in power, but it's the same person who killed our people. How do we give a homage and how do we give submission to a person who has not apologized for what he did? You understand? I myself was young, but I can recall what was happening. I remember a certain day when all of our parents, I was young at that time. My mother was carrying me. I cried a lot to a point that the soldiers had to say, when a mama sugumuham, we understand. That's how my mother survived. Because basala beshayo abanye balinyazwa abanye bathwalele ezibhedlela sebelimele, but my mother had to survive because ngakhala mina kakhulu, and it still rings as if it's yesterday in my mind as it was happening. So I'm going to bring a point, even if Mnangagwa may try to silence people and bring them to the line into submission, that's exactly what they were doing. They saw the power icon ZAPU, the Zipra Force. In a way, what happened to ZAPU and Zipra Force is exactly what Mnangagwa was trying to do to MRP now and all other formations within Mthwakazi. They're fighting for liberation of Mthwakazi. Even if Mnangagwa may try to silence the people, there's no way in silence what needs to be done. He may try, but he may not. But one simple looking at is Mnangagwa is just trying to buy time so that at least if people can be forced to submit, he may be able to have an extended 5 years or 10 years in a way without people bothering him. But what we are simply saying as MRP, we are simply saying is there's no reason we should drop back what we have already started, because the issues of Matabeleland are very critical to a point that people are pinning their hopes on whoever is trying to actually to come up with a solution. So in a way, there are people that are pinning their hopes on what MRP is doing. There are people who are putting their hopes on what other actors are doing. And if we will submit to what Mnangagwa is saying, and then we stop, we're actually stopping a revolution, which is not MRP's revolution, but it is a revolution of the people. But who are behind the scenes supporting all that is done by the political spectrum. So in a way, as MRP, there's no way we can stop. We are going to continue. Whether our security is guaranteed or is not guaranteed, there's no way we should stop. We just need to continue putting pressure, because what you're simply doing is you're putting pressure on Mnangagwa and this regime so that they may act upon the issues of Matabeleland, because silence in any way will not solve our problem. There's a statement that was once uttered by Martin Luther who said, it is not safe for a person to speak against their own conscience. When he was meant to be silenced, he had written some theses, I think about 80 or 70 something theses that he nailed on the door during the time of the Roman Revolution. Martin Luther, when he was forced to retract his words, says, no, I will not retract my words, for it is not safe for a man to speak against his own conscience. So it's useless. We see that happening with different people in participation within the political spectrum in Zimbabwe. They try by all means to gloss over these issues as if they never happened. You know, they try to act as if Zimbabwe is a unitary state. No, we need to be rational about all this and so on. But being rational about what is happening while the perpetrators continue to enjoy immunity or continue to also perpetrate other issues without impunity does not serve any purpose. So either way, within the context of Zimbabwe, there is a need for people or a grouping like MRP and other activists to continue piling up pressure in this regime until the solution is found.
Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Moyo. Baba Mpofu, ithi ngize kuwe baba. Umbuzo wami is in twofold. Uthi the statement that was uttered by the president, what will be its impact? Just as a standalone statement, how will it affect the people? And secondly, assuming that maybe he start to carry out his threats clandestinely, what will be the impact on the Mthwakazi movement and the people?
Thank you, Babunkala. I hope I can be heard clearly.
Yes, yes.
Established another connection alternative to the one I was using.
All right. Yeah, you are very clear.
I will begin where I ended, in that the genocides are determined to continue with the genocide. No doubt about it. Ngababulali. Bheka le ndlela ababulalana ngayo, ushiri indlela abulewe ngayo, indlela umjura abulawa ngayo, le ndlela abacontinue ngayo bepoisonana befakelana ekudleni bebulalana. So they are determined. And so should be the victims of Kukurawundi. They should be determined to resist, to challenge ababulali la. About the impact of that statement, I want to begin exactly at that point where the first impact of that statement is that Mnangagwa has been forced by fear and guilt to come out and speak the way he spoke, to come out and threaten, to come out and try and frighten, to come out and try and remind the victims of Kukurawundi of the genocide, wishing that people will be scared into silence. I'm glad that uvelile uyasho lapho ukuthi akula muntu ozoba scared sokuqhubeka sisilwa. And the other impact is that even if they continue as Dr. Ndlovu has observed, to operate clandestinely, eliminating, disappearing, assassinating, and killing people. Now that this statement has been made public, whatever events, whatever incidents, whatever accidents follow now, whatever will happen to these activists, Zimbabweans, the region of Africa, and the world will know that these events followed after the illegitimate and illegal state president had uttered these threats. And this threat was not the first. Just last week, he threatened chiefs that if there are any chiefs that will support activists that will do this, we are going to dethrone them. So it's a program. It's not an accident. It's a program to threaten, to frighten. And I insist analytically that the first person that is frightened is Mnangagwa himself. The first person that is threatened is Mnangagwa himself. The first person that is afraid is Mnangagwa himself. Never mind the bravado, the strong words, the hot air. This is a man who doesn't sleep because of fear of what will happen to him. This is a perpetrator who has killed people, and those people are haunting him. And I'm glad that the victims are not keeping quiet and are standing up to say, we will challenge you. And more energy and more power should be put into that. And Mnangagwa must not be guaranteed that ZANU-PF will remain with the monopoly of violence, the monopoly of killing, the monopoly of threatening. Mass murder. The victims of genocide are standing up and are saying, we are not forever going to be victims. He should know that and know it very well. Thank you.
Okay, what about the second part of the question?
Okay, if you can rehash it for me, please, Nkala Ngabonga.
Okay, no, I asked if he carries out his threats clandestinely, what will be the impact to the Mthwakazi movement?
Yeah, maybe what we should do is to look at that question otherwise. What should be done? Definitely, these genocides, these criminals against humanity are going to do something about the energy and the power of the victims on the ground and the activists. The question maybe should be, Kala, what should be done? So my assertion will be, as soon as you realize that colleagues and comrades are being eliminated clandestinely, they are disappearing, they are being poisoned, they are being arrested, what is it that the activists are going to do on the ground? And I'll go back to the beginning of my presentation today. Invoke international law, invoke your right to rebel, invoke your right to disobey illegal and illegitimate government, invoke your right to rebel, and invoke your right to be revolutionary and challenge a system. What these people are holding as their entitlement to power is that they went to war and fought the secular colonialist regime. What Abu Velile and others should hold as their claim to fame is to go out and fight a native colonial regime. They fought seculars, now you should fight native colonialists. So that's what should be done. People should not resign to the positionality of being victims. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Baba Ndlovu, some questions to you.
I think in response to the first question, I would say we are already feeling the impact. In fact, this meeting now is the impact of the statement. I would say there's always been an assumption, especially on his side and on the side of his friends, that what they did in the 1980s will always linger in our heads and over our heads and over our minds. But I'll take it that the way we are responding now to the statements that they have issued, it is actually a sign, I believe, that more and more people will also respond the way we are responding in this particular meeting. So abantu bayakhuluma, abantu bayabonisana, people are mobilizing one another themselves. People are exploring ways. People are exploring ways of being proactive rather than being reactive. Because remember, like I said earlier on, in the 1980s, we reacted because we were not anticipating anything of this kind. But this time around, now that we know the monster that we are dealing with and what his capabilities are, there's certainly no reason why people should fold their arms and wait until he shows up by their doorstep. So I think the immediate impact is that people are talking, people are re-strategizing, and they are ngiyakholelwa ukuthi nakho kuma-structures and the closed doors MRP. So kukhona ingxoxo nenkulumo about how to maybe beef up security, how to really tackle this matter head on. Because you see, the assumption that has always existed in Mnangagwa's camp has always been that the people will wait and hear from them and then just play victim and so on and so forth. As you can see how this Mthwakazi voice, whether it comes in as Mthwakazi or as Velile or whatever the name and appellation, it has been growing, I would say, in the last 1.5 to 2 decades. This voice has been growing every day. Now, you know, I want to remind us here that they have been ignoring for quite some time. They pretended that they were not aware that these kind of voices were prevailing in the communities and so on. But now the pressure has been brought to bear upon them because they can see it is growing, it has gathered momentum. Interestingly, Babungala and everybody else, many groups, many political formations that are contesting this election, this current by-election as it is being held today. But the strongest and the sternest voice from the president is directed to a formation which is not even participating in the election, which is an indication that he doesn't seem to see the threat posed by the rest of the formations. But the threat that seems to keep making him uncomfortable is the one that has come from people who are not even participating. Because remember, this question of MRP not participating is in itself, you know, it throws a quiz down to his table. He doesn't understand what's up their sleeve. Why are they not here with the rest of us, you know, taking part in his circus of an election? You know how he always wants to run it as if it were a personal kind of a project. So at the end of the day, he is actually disturbed, and he might try, as we have already highlighted, to go underground in terms of his own operations. But I can say with absolute conviction that, you see, the way I have seen this movement and this sentiment grow over the years, people, more and more people are persuaded. And even right now, people who have always been skeptical maybe of the secessionist idea, those who have always been faithful to what they call a nationalist agenda and so on, a lot of them, since these statements were thrown around, are beginning to question the sincerity of the Harare administration when it continues to say Zimbabwe is a unitary state. Because it raises the question of what is a unitary state? Who made it a unitary state? For what reason do we have to keep emphasizing this? Unless we are inadvertently acknowledging that there are diversities that need to be managed. I think if Mr. Mnangagwa were very wise and proactive, he should have found a way of, you know, narrowing the gulf between two states. I would want to use that, two entities that seem to be drifting away from each other. as a president, he should be finding a way to bring that word, to cover that word and bring them together. So because he is thinking along the ways he did in the 1980s, he is not proactive enough to see that this drifting apart of these two communities rather is something to be managed. So he continues to carry the same threat that he did in the past, and he's hoping that the method he used will continue to be accepted and to be applied by him the way he did, and it's going to be received the way it was initially distributed by him. And with that, I think he is overlooking a lot of facts and a lot of realities on the ground. So basically, I believe it's not going to work in his favor, whichever way.
Okay, kulungile sizozama ukuthi silugqibe lolu hlelo mbona sesidonsile kodwa ke before senze lokho angize kini nonke one by one ukuthi ngicela linikeze istatement whatever elingabe licabanga ukuthi angikubuzanga but elifisa ukuthi likudlulise. Angiqale ngawe baba Mpofu.
Okay, kuyabongeka baba uNkala. Mhlawumbe umuntu angakutsho nje is that the clandestine activities that Dr. Ndlovu alluded to have already been taking place. I've said about the poisonings and other illicit and illegal activities that the Mnangagwa regime has been carrying it out. You remember the bombing of the plaques that were erected by communities in commemoration of their victims, their loved ones that died. The message that we should read, combining these clandestine activities and the statement that the president has made, is that all this effort that we see, the gathering of the chiefs, grouping civil society organizations that Mnangagwa is doing, and actually declaring that Kukurahundi should be discussed openly and that people should work towards a solution led by the chiefs. All that is the nonsensical, is pretending, is child's play, is trying to pull some wool over the eyes of the people. The true statement, the true standpoint that he holds is what he just said in that rally. So people should stop being used. The chiefs should stop being used. What Mnangagwa really believes is what he said in that rally. And as I said before, he did not say it because he is strong. He did not say it because he is powerful. He said it because he is guilty, because he is afraid. And let me deposit here. He's not only afraid of the victims of Kukurahundi genocide now, there are also internal issues. As an illegitimate leader that came through fraud and through force, he is standing on very slippery ground, actually standing on a straw. So we are looking at a pathetic but dangerous individual. A pathetic and a dangerous individual is very dangerous. But all the same, let everyone help him fast track himself to his tragic end, as I said. Thank you very much for this platform and the contributions that you have made, and the colleagues in this platform, Dr. Ndlovu, Baba, Velile, Moyo. Kuyabongeka kakhulu.
Hayi siyabonga baba Mpofu. Ubaba uMagonya uthi ufisa ukubuza umbuzo. Asizi ukuthi umbuzwa uthini.
Kasumbuzo engilawo is just a comment. Umbuzo engilawo bese ngeke ngawubhala umnumzana uNdlovu lapho bese ngazana uzama ukuphendula. But mina into ebengifuna ukuyitsho lapha ngaphandle kokuthi ngibingelele bafowethu uMpofu lo Moyo lo Ndlovu. Ukuthi ake sizamenini ukuthi njengabantu bakoMthwakazi ke sibeni a bit more serious and forceful entweni esiyifunayo. Eqinisweni njalo sekelenini ukuthi sidlale ngabantu as leaders and potential leaders and as opinion makers, because isizwe siyachabalala. Thina sibhizi kuma WhatsApp, sibhizi kuma Twitter, sibhizi. Well, there's nothing tangible esiyenzayo on the ground. So isicelo sami yilesi ukuthi sesifikile esigabeni sokuthi sikunanzelele ukuthi indlela sezimbili kuphela ezokuthi sisolve iproblem yethu. Njalo simise ukuhlanya kuka Mnumzana maye ezatshela abantu ukuthi uzababulala ngoba this is exactly what he was saying. So ake sizameni ukuthi sithi bring abantu bakithi ndawonye and democratically claim and reclaim i-political space yethu as uMthwakazi. And nxa kuyikuthi kuyehlula basivimbela ukuthi sithi reclaim our political space and occupy political space yethu koMthwakazi, then we need the leadership of sound mind. So my clarion call ukuthi ake sibeni imbumba. Asibeni imbumba nxa lisiya researcher baba Mpofu lo baba Ndlovu. Nxa lisiya kwenza research zenu. Le researcher ngokuthi kambe abantu bakithi, how best can we bring together all these political voices zibe nyandanye, lizama ukuthi ke liphume labasu lamaqhinga ukuthi abantu bengabanjaniswa njani, how best can people be brought together ukuthi be understand ukuthi power in politics lies in unity. If we are divided as a people, we will never achieve any meaningful political power within our region. Sizaqhubeka amabandla wona la abuye ezosinika abantu abazosimela bazabuya bezomela amabandla abo in our midst. So silabo MLF, kulabo MLO, kulabo MRP and so on and so forth. Ake sizameni ukuthi okunye sikubonayo ukuthi hayi lokho it's not feasible at the moment. Ake sikhohlweni ngakho, ke sibambeni into eyodwa ebambekayo, into esingahamba layo. Siyethola umbuso ezigabeni zakithi. Singathola umbuso okuningi siza kudecide nxa sesile political power in our region. At the moment sisabalele, abanye bahlaba umkhosi besiyale, abanye bahlaba umkhosi besiyale, akuqedakala ukuthi kanti vele okuyikho yikuphi. So asifunde nini ukuthi ke sibe ngabantu abalengqondo njengamaskoti. Of course kulamanye amaskoti abangosendelinye who stand against independence of Scotland, but ake sifunde nini ukuthi nxa singabantu sibone nini problem, sivumelane ukuthi no problem yabafowethu singayitackla this way. Mbona ngani nxa siyenza njalo singaba lakho ukuthi sithole isisombululo ku problem esilayo yakuqala as isizwe sohlanga. Ngiyabonga.
Siyabonga kakhulu baba Magonya, siyabonga kakhulu. Angazi noma kubafowethu ukhona ongabe efisa ukuthi esho something kulokho okukhulunywa nguMagonya noma siqhubekele phambili.
Ubaba Magonya, ngiyabonga kakhulu ubaba Magonya, sanibona. Bese sike sathi ukuxhumana ku private chat. esho nje zona lezi zinto cishe azishoyo, esho nokuthi people must be practical. Ngibona sengathi iyo lento asebuye wayigcizelela okwamanje. Bengithi nje ngithi acknowledge what he said. And mina bengithe mangumphendula ngathi practical is contextual. Bengizama ukuveza ukuthi i-context, there's a context that we must define before we can take ama-practical steps. I think naye kulokho asethe wakukhuluma ngokuthi kufuneke sidingisise ulwazi ukuthini abantu bangahlanganiswa noma bangabanjaniswa kanjani. It's a very valid point that it must really be taken into account. Angibonge kulokho.
Okay, hayi siyabonga. Baba Ndlovu, usesekhona lapho nje njengoba bese ngivele sengitshilo ukuthi uma kukhona engingakubuzanga khona but ofisa ukuthi ukudlulise baba.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu Baba uNkala, ngibonge yonke ipanel, bonke laba bantu, obaba uMpofu, obaba uMoyo, obaba uMagonya. Nawe Baba uNkala ngokusinikeza ithuba lokuthi sizoxoxa kule inkundla. Mina engingakusho bathi ke ngesingisi the horse has already bolted out of the stable. Yonke into eyenzakeleyo nokukhuluma khona lokho kwakho indoda kuqina lokho esesizizwa sesimele sikhulume ngakho nathi sikuhluzisise. Kusukela ekutheni ekuqaleni babecabange ukuthi baqedile nesizwe sohlanga. Kodwa ngoba sesilokho siba sivuka umfukula bathi ugodwa alushi ngokubasela. Sesilokho sivuka umafa avuke njengedangabani. Sokube thusile. Ngijabulela ke ukuthi njengoba benje obaba uvelile Moyo, ngiyangijabulele ukuthi abantu abaningi abanombono cisho njengowabo ovelile Moyo nabanye ngabantu abasha, okukhomba ukuthi labo abadala mhlawumbe abesebephekelelwe ngumphako, abesebebona sengathi lamaphupho ukuthi abantu babuye bazimele kasekho. Ngibona ngizathanda ukukhuthaza ekutheni asijabuleleni ukuthi labo abeza emuva babona ngelinye iso, bahamba ngolunye unyawo. Ngijabulela ukuthi abawubamba umshini owasha isizulu basazimisele ekuthini uma kukhona amaqhinga namasu ney'ndlela zokubambisana ukuthi kudonsiswane kuyiwe phambili. Hayi zisazoboshwa inkabi impela, zisazoba khona izipane, kusazoqala indima ezintsha. Ikusasa liyaphila noma okwamanje kubukeka sengathi abantu basebumnyameni, kodwa kwakubuye kushiwo ukuthi the darkest hour is before dawn. Liyeza ikuseni nayo indosakuza. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Hayi siyabonga Baba Ndlovu. Ubaba uMoyo, Baba Moyo, akhona amazwi ongabufisa ukuthi uwadlulise engabe ngakubuzanga khona baba?
Siyabonga kodwa ngibonge kakhulu Baba uNkala. Ngiphinde ngibonge ubaba uNdlovu, ngibonge ubaba uMpofu laphana. Ukuthi bebe khona labo kulolu hlelo from a scholastic point of view, ukhangelekwe ngendaba zalokhu kwenzakala eZimbabwe, okuyindaba endala ongasona entsha. Ngibonge i-contribution kaMagonya laphana. That is a very good contribution. Ikakhulu that provokes unity and also proactivity in terms of coming up with a solution. My problem Machiavellian are deep and I think more involvement and more hands on the deck was a solution. I think it's a point taken there, especially looking at the scholastic approach. Can they research and come up with a way, one that can actually help unite abantu within the context of Mthwakazi, so that you come up with something concrete. Easier ukuthi a rope of many strands is also, but at the same time, the weakest link of the chain, the chain is no stronger than its weakest link. So maungazi chain, which a chain is ions, but my weakest link one, it can't be stronger than that weakest link. So those are the things we need to close as a nation if we really want to achieve our solutions as soon as possible. Then when a small question that I needed to ask from maybe looking at the current situation and what is happening, and after those statements, what are any legal ways that as a nation we can seek for the sake of security, looking at the context of Zimbabwe and looking at the vulnerability of Abantu Bagiti? Is there any legal arrangement international from the international law that can be pursued to come up with a solution? Because the only thing that is there now after what you say, which abantu abaningi, they cannot even walk in the public within Zimbabwe. And for that reason, we cannot have a guarantee within the context of state security as Zimbabwe, because the commander-in-chief has already spoken. So maybe from the research, are there any possible ways that can guarantee security within a context of Philani?
Baba Ndlovu, mawungaqala ukuphendula umbuzo.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu ukhonselinsele impela ubaba uMoyo. Right, i-principle aba-operator ngayo kabanzi kakhulu baba uMoyo ku-international law, i-principle athi sovereign equality of nations, and this principle of non-interference in the affairs of other states. Okudala ukuthi kube lukhuni ukuthi ezinye izizwe zilunguze ngaphakathi and see exactly what's happening. So the issue maybe of lifting that sovereignty veil is always problematic. Khona kukhona ama-international tribunals anjengabo ICCC, where such statements, if thoroughly investigated, kwenziwe paperwork to establish exactly is this a crime, and as I insinuated earlier on, there is no law in Zimbabwe that justifies a statement of this kind by anybody, not even the president. So it is possible in principle to take legal action, maybe not with the intention to win, but at least with the intention to bring to the table just that issue and make it topical and an issue of discussion. So whilst it has been said in some circles that the judiciary in Zimbabwe is captured, I think it should always be tested on these issues. We must bring that litmus test, get a legal team together and file papers at the court in Zimbabwe to challenge the constitutionality of the utterances of the president. Because certainly those utterances are anti-constitutional, they are undemocratic, they actually threaten the lives of the people without any legal basis and legal substance. So I think in principle, he has committed an offense. He has committed a criminal offense because he did not speak within his powers as a president. He actually overstepped the limits of a president, because there is nowhere in the constitution and in the law where he is actually empowered to threaten people. Maybe the only part where he could say he was within the law is the first part where he talks about arrest. But again, arrest happens within a particular legal context. So I would suggest that a team should be put together, a legal team, have a complainant who is the public or whoever is bold enough to come to the open as a complainant, and start prosecuting it from there, even through that judicial system whose credibility may be questionable. but still take it through them and hear what they've got to say about the whole thing. I think that's an approach that should be very plausible.
Yeah, ngiyakuzwa ukuthi approach maybe i-first step akuyiwe khona kuma-court aseZimbabwe. Yeah, I agree with it's a good idea. But let's say wehlula eZimbabwe, ubone ngathi indawo njenge-South Africa ingasebenza noma i-SADC noma i-AU.
Right. First, kuvele uqalwe eZimbabwe for one reason. If you are going to take the matter to any tribunal outside, bazokubuza nge-issue ama-internal remedy. What have you done internally? Because you cannot just come out and report about a sovereign state when you have not tried anything internally. So the first step should be an internal an application or whatever within the country, pursue the matter up to its logical end. Then the next would be the African Union. The reason being South Africa is another sovereign state which is equal to Zimbabwe. So on the principle of sovereignty, there is no way a South African court can sit in judgment of another sovereign state who is external. So that one is out, especially on this particular one. So it would be tribunals of the nature such as maybe the African Commission for Human Rights and so on. Yeah, those should be the most competent. But otherwise, it should be internally, then a regional, then an international one. Looking at maybe, like I mentioned, the ICCC, having verified, of course, whether Zimbabwe is a signatory of it and whether, it is bound and so on and so forth. But those are the channels. Certainly not another state, because there's no court outside, there's no foreign court that would be competent to hear a matter where another sovereign is involved.
Okay, I see. Siyabonga. Baba Mpofu, umbuzo kaBaba Moyo angazi normally uzwile.
Ngithemba ukuthi ubaba Ndlovu wendlale kahle impendulo yakhe ngama options akhona, especially that the legal efforts should start internally, and then a way must be found on how these legal efforts can be internationalized. But after showing that we have exhausted internal legal avenues that are available for seeking recourse. And let me say the most important thing maybe, Babu Moyo, is the continued, persistent and consistent political activism, especially deploying the tool of communication that is available with the unfolding of the fourth industrial revolution now. Tell the world what is happening. Write letters to other governments and other political parties. Send messages to the World Wide Web so that these people cannot do anything without the international community, the regional community, and the national community knowing what they are doing. That is a very powerful weapon, which I think is the one that has compelled isambane ukuthi siphume emlindini sitting isambane. Lakanye ngoba uyakwazi emakhaya ma ungawuza umgodoyi ukhonkotha phandle ebusuku, asiso sonke isikhathi ukuthi uyabukhonkotha ngoba ufuna ukuhlasela. Kwesinye isikhathi uyakhonkotha umgodoyi ngoba usesaba. So don't take lightly the fact that the genocidal president has come out to own his position as a genocidal president and promise further genocide. All that is a result of the struggles on the ground that you have fought, you and others in the collective. So increased, invigorated political activism is still one of the greatest weapons in the hands of the victims and the oppressed in the present. Thank you very much.
Siyabonga Baba Mpofu. Kuhle kakhulu, siyabonga kakhulu, unless and until if any one of you would like to say something before we close.
Hayi, mina ngibonga ithuba nengxoxo nokufunda esengikwenzile ngosuku lwanamhlanje. Ngiyabonga.
Benginesicelo lapho ukuthi uyabona nxa lisenza inhlelo ezinje babankala.
Yebo baba.
Ake lizame ukuthi lisinike isikhathi and broadcast this widely ukwenzela ukuthi kube labantu bakithi sizoxoxisana nini ngodaba lolu ngoba aso problem kaMagonya kaNkala kaNdlovu kaMpofu loMoyo le. This is the national problem. We are talking about an existential threat to isizwe sohlanga la. So ngesicelo sokuthi kwelizayo nxa lisenza inhlelo njengalezi give people time ke lizama ukuthi li-advertise ukuthi lizaba li-program enje ngesikhathi esinje ngoba nxa siya ukuthi sizokhuluma udaba oluqakatheke kangaka sibuye sibe ngu-4, 5, 6 impressions okhaya ngala abantu bakithi they are not interested, they are not serious about the problem esibhekane layo njengesizwe sohlanga. Kanti-ke abantu they really would want to come in but isikhathi mina lami ngidibane layo nje kwenye i-chat group i-advert wena lokuthi kulomhlangano lamuhla and lesikhathi sakhona futhi ekuseni ngo-11 kunje abantu abaningi they are colonized basema-church abanye bakwezinye indawo abanye basemsebenzini so nxa lingazama ukuthi lisenzele imihlangano le yande kodwa li-advertise njalo linika abantu isikhathi esiqondileyo isikhathi si-appropriate rather when most people can be available. Uyabona abantu bempumalanga nxa besenza imihlangano yabo ufica bengama 1700 1400 lathi siyabe sikhona khonapho kodwa nxa sisenze yethu siba ngu-6 7 5 4 yinto ebezidinga ngitsho leyo babankala.
Okay, I know siyabonga baba Magonya. Eqinisweni ukuthi this meeting besingayi-advertisanga nje just deliberate besifuna nje ukuthi sibe ne-pre-recorded lokuzen session then siyipublish. Before ngivale baba Moyo, is there anything else you want to say maybe kulokho okukhulunyiweyo ngombuzo wakho lona noma usuqedile?
Hayi, ngicabanga ukuthi kuzwakele baphendule kahle. Those are options and alternatives ezingakhona. Ngicabanga ukuthi hayi kuzwakele kahle impela. Kuzwakele kahle.
Okay, I know. Sibongile kakhulu.
Ngiyabonga.
All right, sibongile kakhulu ukuthi lisivakatshele kuma-Television Broadcasting Corporation. Siyathemba ukuthi ngokuzayo ma sihlaba ukhwelo njalo sithi sicela ukuthi lisivakatshele lizoza njalo sibuye sixoxisane ngoba lezi ndaba ezinje ziyavula abantu ingqondo, ziyavula abantu amehlo, ziyafundisa kakhulu. So siyacela ukuthi ma silicela sithi hayi siyalimema kuma-Television Broadcasting Corporation lize njalo. Sibongile kakhulu.
Bongekile.
Asidibaneni njalo ngokuzayo.
Ngiyabonga.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.